Hi, I'm Dr Sula, and these are my words to live by. As a health psychologist and psychotherapist, I often meet my clients when they feel like they're at the end of the road. They have health issues that are often baffling to them, whether that's fatigue, whether it's pain, gut dysregulation, bladder or pelvic symptoms. The effect is that they can't live their lives in the way that they would like to, and they worry that they never will again. This becomes cyclical. The suffering from symptoms and impediment to life, and the calculations or analysis about what caused these problems, what keeps it going, how to get rid of them, end up feeding into each other. And this keeps people locked into their symptoms. Their brain is labeling the physical experience as a threat, and the autonomic nervous system is behaving accordingly. Cortisol, adrenaline, epinephrine running through the bloodstream and changing the function of organs and muscle systems, often with the effect of exacerbating the symptoms and keeping them going. This creates ongoing dysregulation in the body. Allostatic load is the name given to the cumulative physical effects of psychological experiences and stress on the body. Our body has various allostatic systems that work to keep everything running smoothly and healthily. Our neuroendocrine, immune, metabolic, and cardiovascular systems are all working together towards homeostasis, which is a term to describe bodily equilibrium. Decades of research show the impact of allostatic load on health and on mental health. It also shows that aside from the specific biological disruptors, psychology and our social environment and experiences have a huge impact on the degree to whether our body can get back to homeostasis regularly enough to remain healthy. For many of us, we haven't learned to befriend our minds, much less our emotions. This can mean that we apply the same rigid and fixed approaches to try and micromanage them, like we do other things in our lives. For example, trying to avoid bad thoughts or anything that will cause stress, trying to live a pure and serene life with only good feelings. But none of this is possible, and it ends up stacking up unrealistic expectations and pressures and ultimately causing more stress. Wherever I meet someone in the journey, the overarching aim is simple, although the process may not always be so because of the years of history our brains and our bodies bring with them. The aim is to befriend mind and body and get them working as a team. The process always starts with learning the science, truly peer-reviewed science, behind the mind-body connection. For those with gut disorders, learning that contractions in the gut are sped up or slowed down according to what the sympathetic nervous system is doing helps to make the link between bowel experiences and the wider life experiences and daily routines. For those with bodily pain that moves around, changes, and sometimes is unbearable, it's important to learn how pain works. That pain is more than just tissues firing messages of distress because of localized violations. That pain involves calculations made in the brain to determine how much pain someone should feel and for how long. And what influences this includes emotions, perceptions of pain, an ability to receive help and the experience of being supported or not, past memories, and much more. For those with persistent fatigue, perhaps starting after a virus or a period of illness, it can be hard to understand that what kicked off the fatigue is not what keeps it going necessarily now. That the virus or illness causes a disruption to the allostatic systems in our body, but part of the maintenance of fatigue is the threat that its experience represents in our body on a physiological level as well as a psychological level. For this reason, it's important that you get the opportunity to understand and process your journey from a biopsychosocial lens. A biopsychosocial approach allows you to understand the interacting role of biology, psychology, and social experiences. It doesn't reduce physical experiences down to purely psychological in a way that many experience as entirely dismissing or disempowering. Instead, it helps to demystify why symptoms started and what contributes to keeping them going. Too many people get derailed by trying to find the specific match that created the flame that then ignited the bonfire, when what they need is support in identifying the elements that are now keeping the fire going and finding solutions to remove them with permission to step back from the heat when it takes a bit of time for the fire to go out. Unfortunately, we don't get taught these models or approaches in an inherently biomedical model and wider society. And that means it can feel fringe and fanciful and unsafe. That's why having trusted professionals, resources and references is so important. To not get caught in the wormhole of social media misinformation and overstated promises of transformations. Once familiar with the biopsychosocial view of health and overall wellness, we can then get specific, looking at symptom cycles. To do this, we can consider the experience of symptoms in different situations and how they unfold, considering how automated responses feed back into the body, serving to exacerbate or maintain long-term. To do this, we consider the experience of symptoms in different situations and how they unfold, considering how automated responses feed back into the body, serving to exacerbate or maintain symptoms long-term. This will be different across health experiences and symptoms, but common processes that come out in this analysis include symptom focusing. Symptom focusing is the automatic way that the brain hones in on symptoms to try and monitor if they're getting better or if they're getting worse. When we understand how the brain interacts with the body, we can then see how this determination of threat and increased focus on sensory experience can end up keeping it going. We can do a little exercise here. So imagine right now that you've been told that there's an outbreak of head lice, but this outbreak is not like any other outbreak, it's virulent. The lice reproduce at the rate of knots and they don't seem to be killed in the usual ways by the usual shampoos. The best way to catch the infection is as early as possible, and to do this you should become aware of any signs of infestation as soon as possible. So focus now on your head. Notice if you can feel the faintest of itches, if you can feel any strands of hair moving, if there's any heat on your head. Give it a moment, see what happens. What do you feel? What do you notice? If you have adequate time to imagine and allow your attention to stay on your head, many of you will have felt something, perhaps an itch, maybe even scratched your head. This reflects how the brain sensation dynamic works. Mental calculations and analysis are another common process that contribute to symptom cycles. The brain finds it hard to distinguish between worrying and problem solving. When ruminating on health or other difficulties, the threat centers in the brain, like the amygdala and broader limbic system, are activated with potential repercussions on the performance of various allostatic symptoms and systems. Avoidance and withdrawal is another common symptom cycle maintainer. It's so hard to keep showing up and doing things when you're impacted by symptoms. It's even harder when you try and you're misunderstood or you're criticized or you're judged, which can be the experience of many of those people with health difficulties. It's intuitive to withdraw when this happens or when we imagine that it will happen. Unfortunately, we know that isolation, loneliness, lack of social support all has a negative effect on health outcomes and the various allostatic systems. Lack of social support is an influencer of all-cause mortality and poor health-related quality of life. And if you're listening and resonating, but find it hard to work out what to do for the best, when there are very real situations and experiences that make it hard to do something different, you're not alone. Too often, social media and self-help give the implicit messaging that with the right information, you should be able to figure things out on your own and then get better. But the reality is that the process is iterative, and getting feedback and an alternative perspective, as well as support and cheerleading when things are tough and when you have wins, is so fundamental. Here are some of the tools that we incorporate for people having difficulties with symptom focusing, mental analysis, withdrawal, and many of the other things that come with health issues and burnout. The first foundation is mindful awareness. Developing a relationship with your body, nervous system, and emotions that is familiar, safe, and flexible. I introduce my clients early on to the concept of a nervous system thermometer chart so that people can start to recognize physically and emotionally when they're activated, deactivated, or content. Most of the time, we ping pong between the state of activation, deactivation, with rare moments of contentment. We can mistake deactivation mode for being in the safe content mode because externally they might look quite similar. Lying in bed can be something we do when content, happily resting and enjoying the comfort. Equally, it can be something that we do when we're deactivated. Thoughts racing, feeling the sense that we should be doing something else, but physically not having the energy. When we start to recognize the different states, we can tailor our responses accordingly. Part of this work will also involve allowing and expressing emotions. This is partially an internal practice, creating space to be with challenging emotions without the rush to fix or suppress them. Another part of the work is external, so finding ways that we can get our voices heard and we can put down boundaries. Assertiveness is a really underrated intervention when considering our health. Building on these foundations, we can make tailored behavioural changes as related to symptoms, at which point people start to recognise that their experience is changing. It is at this point that we might start to address cognitive biases that our brain has. The fact that our brain is a threat detecting machine that is looking for risk and signs that things may not be okay in the future really does us a disservice when we're vulnerable. The exciting thing is that because of neuroplasticity, our brain's ability to change itself based on what we do with it, we can level the playing ground a little and recalibrate our brains to a more neutral stance. And this allows us to enjoy our successes without fearing for the failure that may come next. It allows us to be present with a body that feels neutral and content without being on guard for symptoms. One of the core elements inherent through this work is human connection. In a capitalist and individualistic society, we have a loneliness epidemic. When you're vulnerable or with health issues, the likelihood of feeling lonely, isolated and disconnected increases. In the healthcare system, 80% of women have reported feeling dismissed. As we've explored, all of this physically impacts our bodies, not just our psychological experience, which in itself is extremely hard. It causes disruption to our allostasis and it keeps us unwell. In the work that I do with clients one-to-one, knowing that they have someone who cares, who can be relied upon and who won't turn away from vulnerability is important. But more than that, we look at how they can strengthen their social network and their existing relationships. In the Body Mind Connect community, one of the most cathartic elements of the membership is being amongst others who get it and who are doing similar work and experiencing similar challenges and are there to cheerlead together. Whether you are experiencing health issues with or without a diagnosis, or you recognise that you tend to fall into patterns of abandoning your basic needs in the pursuit of security or other goals that might seem more important, you may like to take note of the various elements that I've talked about in the podcast. What resources do you have that could help already? What areas could you experiment with on your own? Whatever your situation, the following questions are ones that you might like to journal on or reflect on in depth. How connected do I feel? How well do I understand what my body tells me and asks of me? And what do I do to honour those messages? How do I handle feeling difficult emotions? How aligned am I to what is truly important to me? Follow up with yourself to mind map different options you have to improve areas you feel are neglected. Remember that change doesn't always have to be a big overhaul. Often actually change starts small and it grows like a snowball being softly and evenly rolled bit by bit. If you feel that you could benefit from a better understanding of a biopsychosocial approach to health and how to implement it, check out our lovely Body Mind Connect community at bodymindconnect.club. If you feel that you could benefit from therapy from a therapist that understands the mind-body connection and actively works with it, you can get in touch for one-to-one support at healthpsychologist.co.uk. There are tons of free resources on my website, including workbooks, audios, and more, for you to start getting more familiar with these concepts and practices.